I'm moving you to support, that's your new role. The boss's voice cut through the quiet office like a cold wind. I blinked, coffee halfway to my lips. Just yesterday, everything felt normal, typing emails, chatting about weekend plans, hearing laughter from the break room. My phone buzzed with a message from my son asking about his school project. I smiled softly, hiding the sting, not panic, just surprise what was really going on. Before we start, type 1 if you've ever dreamed of getting revenge but never got the chance. No judgment here, and hit that subscribe button. We don't let betrayal slide around here, not even from people who don't subscribe. Let's continue. After that day, everything shifted, not with loud crashes or dramatic scenes, but in quiet, subtle ways that made me pause. My name is Mia, 38 years old, a project manager at a small but growing tech company. At home, I'm the steady anchor for my 2 kids, juggling school runs, homework, and dinners that are never fancy but always warm. I never imagined I'd be facing something like this, not when I was trying so hard to keep everything steady for them. The demotion to a support role felt like a slap I didn't see coming. But looking back, there were small signs I missed or brushed off. The boss, Jason, started avoiding eye contact in meetings, replying to my emails with clipped responses. Once I overheard him on the phone, his voice low but sharp. "She's not on board with the direction. We need to handle this quietly." At first, I thought it was just stress or a misunderstanding, but those words lingered. I didn't let myself panic. Instead, I began to watch quietly, collecting pieces of the puzzle. Every glance, every hesitation, every shift in tone from Jason or the others became a thread I tugged gently. One afternoon, while organizing project files, I found an email thread that wasn't meant for me but landed in my inbox by mistake. Discussions about budget cuts and reassignments that included my name in a way that wasn't just routine. That's when I knew something was brewing. But what could I do? I wasn't ready to confront Jason head-on, not yet. I needed facts, clear evidence, something solid to protect myself and my family if the worst happened. So I reached out to a trusted lawyer, Emily. She's sharp, no nonsense, and has helped friends navigate tricky waters before. On a quiet Tuesday morning, I sat across from her in her modest office, the sunlight filtering through blinds, casting soft stripes across the worn carpet. "I'm not sure what's coming," I told her, "but I have a feeling they're preparing to push me out. I don't want to just disappear quietly." Emily nodded, pulling out a notebook. "Good. We'll start by gathering everything you can, emails, messages, any communication that shows intent. We'll need to build a clear timeline. If they're acting unfairly or illegally, we'll have the evidence to fight back." Back at home, I was careful not to let the kids see the weight I carried. After school, I helped with homework, listened to their stories about friends and games, and made sure dinner was ready on time. But once they were tucked in, I'd sit at the kitchen table, laptop open, reviewing emails again and again. I even started jotting down notes in a small leather notebook, a habit I picked up after my mother used to say, "Keep your eyes open and your hands ready." My colleagues started noticing subtle changes too. Lisa, a friend in marketing, mentioned over lunch, "You seem quieter lately, everything okay?" I forced a smile. "Just a lot on my mind." She didn't push, but I knew I could count on her if things got worse. The hardest part was the silence from Jason. No explanations, no face-to-face talk. Just a cold email one afternoon, assigning me to assist with administrative duties, a vague and humiliating title that made it clear where I stood. But I didn't break. Instead, I planned. I asked questions carefully, tested the waters with clients, and quietly explored what else I could do if I lost this job. I even began looking at real estate listings near the company, curious, almost daydreaming about owning a space of my own. Through it all, my husband, Mark, was my quiet anchor. He didn't ask for details, he just listened when I needed to vent, made coffee when nights ran late, and reminded me, "We're in this together." That steady support made a difference I couldn't explain. I wasn't just waiting for the storm, I was preparing to face it, whatever came next. The real question was, would my careful steps be enough to turn this around? It happened one Thursday afternoon, the kind where the sun pours in through the windows just right, and the office feels almost peaceful. Except I was about to find out how quickly that peace can shatter. Jason called me into his glass-walled office, no one else around, which already felt off. I tucked my notebook under my arm, tried to steady my breath. "Mia," he began, voice steady but cold, "we've decided it's best if you leave the company." I blinked. "Leave," my mind raced, trying to catch the meaning behind the word. Was this a polite way of saying fired, demoted further, exiled? Jason's gaze didn't waver. Yes, effective immediately, you're no longer part of the team. The room stayed still for a moment longer, the hum of computers and distant voices beyond the glass seeming far away. I swallowed the surprise, a calm settling over me. I wasn't going to crumble here, not in front of him, not in front of anyone. I see, I said quietly. May I ask why? He shrugged like it was nothing, like I was the one making a fuss over nothing. It's a business decision. Your attitude, your reluctance to align with leadership, it's been noted. The words stung, but I held myself together. Thank you for letting me know, I said. I'll collect my things. I left the office without a scene, my heart steady even as a flicker of doubt crept in. How was I supposed to explain this to Mark, the kids, the friends who believed in me? Back at my desk, colleagues whispered. Some eyes wide with shock, others avoiding me like the moment was contagious. Lisa approached quietly. Mia, I'm so sorry if you need anything. I smiled gently. Thanks, Lisa. I'll be okay. Outside, the usual buzz of life carried on, the honking of cars, the chatter of strangers passing by, but for me, the world had tilted. I was suddenly unmoored. At home, the silence felt heavier. Mark looked up from his book when I walked in, a flicker of worry in his eyes. How was work? He asked. I hesitated. It's over. He frowned. Over, what do you mean? I sat down, trying to explain without breaking the calm. They let me go just like that. Mark's jaw tightened, but he didn't say more. Instead, he reached over and took my hand. We'll figure this out, he said softly. Together. That night after the kids were asleep, I lay awake thinking about what came next. I felt a strange mix of relief and fear. Relief because the uncertainty was gone, fear because now I had to face what I'd been preparing for but never wanted to actually live. I called Emily, my lawyer, first thing the next morning. Her voice was steady on the phone. I expected this, she said, but it's good. Now we have a concrete situation. Let's get to work. We met again in her office where she outlined my options. You have evidence, right? Those emails, the messages, the witnesses. I nodded even though she couldn't see me. Yes, I've kept everything. That's good. We'll prepare a case for wrongful termination, discrimination, and whatever else fits. But you have to be ready for a fight. This won't be easy. I let her words settle. A fight was exactly what I was gearing up for. I wasn't going to vanish quietly. At work, whispers followed me for weeks. Some people expressed pity, others cold indifference. A few offered help, small gestures, a shared coffee, a sympathetic glance. But the team I'd led, the projects I'd nurtured, felt like distant memories now. I wasn't just losing a job, I was losing a part of my identity. The kids noticed. My youngest, Emma, asked one evening, Mom, will you still be working at the place with the big computers? I hugged her tight. Not there, sweetheart, but I'm working on something new. Mark tried to keep things normal, but I saw the strain behind his smiles. Bills piled up on the kitchen counter, reminders of the pressure mounting. Supporting my family wasn't just a priority anymore, it was a necessity. Through it all, I stayed steady. I reminded myself every day, this wasn't the end. It was just the beginning of something different. Something I hadn't seen yet but was preparing to claim. The hardest part was watching Jason and the others act like nothing had changed, as if they'd won. But deep down, I knew better. I was far from defeated. And while they felt secure in their power, I was quietly building something stronger. Something they couldn't take away. The weeks that followed my dismissal were a strange mixture of stillness and intense activity. On the outside, I kept the same calm, collected face I'd always had. But beneath it, I was quietly building a case, brick by brick, piece by piece, against a system that had tried to push me aside. I spent long hours at my kitchen table, the glow of my laptop screen illuminating the scattered papers and notes around me. Each email, every memo, even casual messages from colleagues suddenly took on new meaning. There was no room for guesswork anymore. I needed facts, undeniable proof of the unfair treatment I'd faced. Emily was a constant presence during this time. We scheduled weekly meetings, sometimes more often, dissecting every detail, testing every angle. Mia, the clearer the timeline, the stronger our case, she said one afternoon, flipping through my notebook filled with dates and observations. We want to show not just what happened, but how it wasn't an accident. One of the most important pieces of evidence came from a colleague who'd reached out in secret. Daniel, someone who had worked closely with Jason, slipped me a copy of an internal memo, marked confidential, that discussed plans to restructure the department. My name was mentioned explicitly as part of a necessary personnel shift, disguised as a routine move, but with language that clearly aimed to sideline me. It was a thinly veiled attempt to justify what had been done. I remember staring at that memo for a long time, the weight of it settling in my chest, proof that it was planned, deliberate, and personal. Emily looked over it carefully. "This is gold," she said. "It shows intent. Now we need more, anything that links the decisions to discrimination or retaliation." So I dug deeper. I reviewed every interaction I could remember: calls, meetings, text exchanges. I compiled screen grabs of messages where Jason's tone shifted sharply, or where requests for projects were suddenly withdrawn without explanation. I even recorded conversations with certain colleagues who'd reluctantly confirmed what I'd suspected. The boss had been unhappy with my refusal to play along, to toe the line without question. It was a quiet operation, one that required patience. I was careful, deliberate, never reckless. No confrontations, no rash moves. Every step had to count. One evening, Mark sat beside me as I sifted through documents. "You're really turning this around," he said, his voice low but proud. "I don't know how you keep your head so clear." I smiled softly, tired but resolute. "I have to, for the kids, for us. I'm not just fighting for a job, I'm fighting for a future." Emily also helped me draft a formal complaint, carefully wording the grievances and supporting them with my growing collection of evidence. We prepared to file it with the labor board and explore the possibility of a civil suit if negotiations failed. It was a game of chess, and I was learning the moves fast. Meanwhile, I began looking beyond the immediate fight. With Mark's encouragement, I explored business opportunities, talking quietly to contacts about starting something new, something I could control, free from the politics and betrayals I'd endured. I spent nights researching real estate, financing options, and potential partners. One afternoon, I visited the building where the company's office was located. It was an old structure, solid but showing its age. I walked through the lobby, imagining what it would mean to own a space like this, not just a place to work, but a symbol of taking back control. On the legal side, Emily coordinated with a financial expert to examine company records. There were hints of instability, unreported debts, and risky decisions, details that Jason and his team clearly hoped would remain hidden. It was clear the company wasn't as secure as they pretended to be. I filed official requests for more documentation, inching closer to the full picture. Every new fact I uncovered made me more determined. This wasn't just about me anymore, it was about justice, about exposing the truth, and protecting others who might be next. Throughout it all, I kept my daily routine: school runs, dinners, bedtime stories. The kids didn't need to carry my worries. Mark and I talked late into the night about plans, possibilities, what-ifs. We laughed sometimes, trying to keep hope alive, but I never lost sight of the fight ahead. The tension beneath my calm was a quiet fire, and every day I fueled it with facts, with strategy, with quiet confidence. I wasn't just waiting for the next move, I was ready to make it. The day of confrontation arrived quietly, no dramatic walk-ins or shouting matches. Instead, it was a meeting scheduled under the guise of settlement talks, a final attempt by Jason and the company's legal team to silence the storm I'd quietly built. Emily and I arrived early at the conference room, the walls glass but thick enough to feel like a cage. Jason was already there, flanked by his lawyer, a man in a stiff suit whose eyes flicked between me and Emily with thinly veiled disdain. The others sat around the table, watching, waiting. The tension was almost tangible. Jason's voice was smooth but sharp as he began. "Mia, we've reviewed your claims. Frankly, we believe they're exaggerated. You were offered support and accommodations. Your refusal to cooperate is what led here." I held Emily's gaze for a moment, then fixed my own eyes on Jason. "I disagree," I said calmly. "And I have evidence to show that this was not about performance or cooperation. This was personal, a planned move to push me out because I didn't conform." He scoffed lightly. "Personal, that's a serious accusation." "Indeed," I replied. "Let me show you the internal memo, dated weeks before my demotion, outlining a strategy specifically targeting me. And here are emails where you admit frustration with my attitude, language you wouldn't use with others." Emily handed over the carefully organized files. Jason's lawyer flipped through them, brow furrowing but saying nothing. "Also," I continued, "financial records reveal instability the company tried to hide, risks you knowingly took while sidelining loyal employees. I have testimony from colleagues willing to speak about the pressure you applied to remove me." A murmur spread through the room. Jason's eyes narrowed, but he maintained his composure. "This isn't over," he said, voice low but firm. I smiled faintly. "No, it's just beginning." The lawyer for the company spoke next, attempting to dismiss the claims and paint me as a disgruntled employee. But Emily was ready, countering each point with precise facts and documented proof. The back and forth was intense, a battle of words and wills. At one moment, Jason leaned forward, voice biting, "You think you can take this company down? You're dreaming." I met his gaze steadily. "I'm not dreaming. I'm prepared." As the meeting ended, there was no clear winner declared, but I felt a shift in the room. They had underestimated me, my resolve, my preparation, my strength. Outside the building, Emily turned to me. "You did well. They're rattled, but they won't give up easily. Be ready for their next move." Mark was waiting in the car when I stepped outside. I slipped in beside him, exhaling slowly. "They thought it would be easy to silence me," I said. He took my hand, squeezing it. "But you're not just any employee, you're a force." The weeks that followed were a whirlwind. Jason's team tried to discredit me, whispers, false rumors, attempts to turn colleagues against me. But the evidence I had was solid. My quiet allies in the company and outside began to speak up. The tide was slowly turning. I also started laying groundwork for my own business venture, fueled by the knowledge I'd gained about the company's financial troubles and the property they occupied. The very building where they tried to push me out was now in my sights. Late nights were spent drafting proposals, meeting with investors, and discussing with legal experts how to acquire the company's assets if it fell apart. Mark and I dreamed aloud about the possibilities, turning a symbol of loss into one of strength. One day, I received a call from a close colleague still inside the company. "Mia, things aren't looking good for Jason. The board is worried, and rumors of bankruptcy are spreading." I nodded silently to myself. The final act was approaching. They'd gambled everything, but their foundation was cracking. Throughout it all, I remained calm, confident. I had prepared for this moment with quiet diligence. I wasn't just reacting, I was leading the charge. Jason might have thought he had the upper hand, but he didn't realize how far I'd come and how far I was willing to go. The confrontation was no longer just about a job or a title. It was about reclaiming control, justice, and future. And I was ready to win. After that intense confrontation, things didn't slow down. Instead, they picked up pace like a storm gaining momentum. I felt the weight of every move, every phone call, every document filed. But underneath it all was a quiet confidence, a steady knowing that the path I'd chosen was the right one. Emily was relentless, coordinating legal filings and keeping me updated on every detail. The wrongful termination case was officially underway. Each day brought new pieces of information from the company's side, but thanks to the evidence we'd gathered, they were always a step behind. One morning, Emily called me with news. "Mia, the labor board has accepted our complaint and scheduled a preliminary hearing. This is good. It means they're taking it seriously." I nodded, though she couldn't see me. "Good. We're ready." At the same time, Mark and I were meeting with potential investors. Our plan was clear. If the company collapsed, I wanted to be ready to step in, not just as an employee, but as an owner. We talked about turning the company's building into a hub for small businesses, creating jobs, and building something new from the ashes. "It's ambitious," Mark said one evening as we reviewed our plans over coffee. "But you've always been good at turning challenges into opportunities." I smiled, feeling the warmth of his belief. It's not just ambition, it's survival. Back at the office, now a place I visited only for meetings or when summoned, the atmosphere had changed. Rumors of bankruptcy grew louder, whispers of mismanagement floated through the halls. Employees looked uncertain, many reaching out to me in secret for advice or support. Lisa sent a message late one night. "Mia, thank you for everything. You gave us hope when things seemed hopeless." I replied simply, "We're in this together." Then came the first real victories. The court issued a temporary injunction, halting any further disciplinary action or attempts to block my claims. It was a small but significant win, a sign that the legal system was acknowledging the seriousness of my case. Emily explained, "This means they can't retaliate while we pursue the case. It protects you." With this protection, I felt freer to push harder. I negotiated with investors to secure financing for buying the company's building, a move that felt both symbolic and practical. Owning that building would mean more than just real estate. It would be reclaiming power from those who tried to push me out. One afternoon, I stood in the lobby of the building, running my hand along the worn wooden banister. The air smelled faintly of dust and old coffee, but I saw beyond that, a future I was determined to create. Meanwhile, the company's situation deteriorated. Financial disclosures showed mounting debts, mismanagement, and failing projects. Jason's position became more precarious by the day, and the board began openly questioning his leadership. I stayed focused on my goals, balancing the fight in court with the business deals unfolding behind the scenes. It wasn't easy. Late nights bled into early mornings, calls with lawyers mixed with meetings with financiers. The pressure was immense, but the resolve was stronger. Mark was my constant support. He handled the home front, kept the kids grounded, and reminded me to breathe when I forgot. "You're stronger than you know," he said one night as we sat on the porch, stars overhead. "And you're not alone." That strength was rooted in more than just me. It was in the people who believed in what I was doing. Friends who sent encouragement, colleagues who shared tips, investors who saw potential where others saw risk. One morning, Emily brought me a file-marked settlement proposal. The company wanted to negotiate, recognizing the growing threat of the lawsuit and the financial instability. I read through it carefully. It was tempting, a way to end the battle early, but I knew better. This wasn't just about money. It was about standing up for what was right and building something lasting. "I'm ready to take this all the way," I told Emily. "We keep pushing." She smiled proud, good because the best is yet to come. And she was right. The battle was far from over, but for the first time since that shocking day, I felt a shift, not just in the case but in my own life. I was no longer just a woman pushed aside. I was becoming a leader, a fighter, a builder of new dreams. The building, the lawsuit, the future, they were all pieces of the same story. A story I was ready to write on my own terms. The months after the initial wins felt like watching a slow-motion collapse. Jason's grip on the company slipped further with each passing day. I could almost feel the walls closing in on him, his confidence fading, replaced by desperation. The bankruptcy rumors became fact. The company's debts were insurmountable, and board members began distancing themselves quietly, unwilling to be associated with the sinking ship. Jason's name was whispered with frustration and blame in hallways, where once his commands had been met with respect or fear. I heard through friends still inside that morale was at rock bottom. Projects stalled, clients pulled out, and the company's reputation was tarnished beyond repair. The same office where I'd once led teams and dreamed of growth was now a place of uncertainty and dread. Meanwhile, my life was shifting in the opposite direction. The lawsuit gained momentum, backed by mounting evidence and growing support. Emily's legal team was relentless, filing motions and presenting compelling arguments. The tide was turning. At home, Mark and I noticed the difference too. Bills were paid on time, thanks to a small but steady flow of income from new business ventures we'd started quietly. The kids sensed the change, more laughter at the dinner table, less tension in the air. One evening, Lisa stopped by with news from the office. "Jason's been asked to step down," she said softly. "The board wants new leadership before things get worse." I nodded, the satisfaction tempered by the knowledge that many people were affected by the company's downfall. "It's not about revenge," I said. "It's about accountability." The day came when the bankruptcy court approved the company's restructuring plan, forcing Jason and the old leadership to relinquish control. The building, the very place where I'd faced betrayal, was up for sale. That was when everything truly changed. With the financing secured months earlier, Mark and I made an offer to buy the building. It was ambitious, but I was ready. The idea of owning that space, turning it into something new and hopeful, felt like reclaiming my story. The negotiations were tense but fair. When the final papers were signed, a wave of relief and pride washed over me. I owned the building. Standing in the lobby, the sun streaming through the tall windows, I felt a deep sense of closure and new beginnings. This was more than property. It was a symbol of resilience. At the same time, my lawsuit was nearing resolution. The company agreed to a settlement that included compensation and formal acknowledgement of wrongful treatment. But more than that, it set a precedent, sending a message that such behavior wouldn't be tolerated. Friends and family gathered to celebrate quietly, no loud parties, just warm conversations and shared stories. Mark raised a glass one evening and said, "You turned everything around. Not just for yourself, but for all of us." I smiled, feeling the truth in his words. The journey hadn't been easy. There were days when the weight of uncertainty felt crushing. But through patience, preparation, and quiet strength, I'd transformed a loss into a powerful new chapter. Colleagues who once doubted me reached out with apologies or admiration. Lisa sent a message one morning. "You're an inspiration, Mia. Thank you for showing us what's possible." I replied simply, "It was never just about me." Looking back, the betrayal felt less like an ending and more like a turning point. It forced me to dig deeper, fight harder, and build something truly mine. The kids saw their mother not as someone who lost her job, but as someone who never gave up, who stood tall when it mattered most. And the company. It became a cautionary tale, a reminder that integrity and fairness aren't just words, they're the foundation of any lasting success. I often think about those early days, when Jason told me I was being moved aside when I thought I'd lost everything. Now, standing here as the owner of the building with a new business and a stronger family, it feels almost surreal. But it's real, and it's just the beginning. The building felt different now, alive with possibility instead of old memories. Walking through its halls, I imagined the new faces, new stories that would fill these rooms. It wasn't just about owning a space anymore. It was about creating a place where people could thrive without fear, without betrayal. Mark and I spent weekends planning the renovations, dreaming about community spaces, small offices for startups, and maybe even a cafe where neighbors could gather. The kids loved visiting, their laughter echoing through the empty corridors, reminding me that this was more than a business, it was our future. I often catch myself thinking back to that moment when Jason said, "We're moving you to support." At the time, it felt like a sentence, a door closing. But now I see it as the moment everything changed, the moment I realized I was stronger than I'd believed. It wasn't easy. There were nights I doubted, days when fear crept in. But those moments taught me something valuable. Resilience isn't about never falling. It's about rising again quietly, steadily, with purpose. I shared these thoughts with Emma the other day as we sat on the porch. "Mom, how did you get so strong?" she asked. I smiled, brushing her hair back gently. "By holding on to hope even when things look darkest, and by never forgetting who I'm fighting for." The fight shaped me, but it didn't define me. I'm no longer the woman sidelined, silenced, or underestimated. I'm the woman who owns her story, who turns setbacks into stepping stones. Friends and family often ask what's next. I tell them the truth. I don't have all the answers yet, but I'm excited to find out. To build, to grow, to keep moving forward. Because life isn't about avoiding storms, it's about learning to dance in the rain. And if there's one thing I've learned, it's that sometimes losing everything is the very thing that gives you the chance to gain what truly matters. So here I stand, ready for whatever comes next. Stronger, wiser, and free.